Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a weapon that is completely silent, totally invisible, and feels like it's been pulled straight out of a spy thriller. We're talking about the really unsettling science of infrasound.
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, right? The very idea of an invisible, inaudible force that can harm or maybe even control people. But believe it or not, this isn't fiction, so let's take a look at the documented reality. So here's how we're going to break it down. To really understand this invisible threat, first we'll decode the science behind it. Then we'll get into its absolutely shocking effects on the human body, see how it can be weaponized against the mind, and then finally we'll look at what this kind of technology actually means for our future.
Okay, let's jump right into our first section, the unheard threat. Now, to really wrap our heads around this, we need to know where all this incredible and frankly kind of alarming information is coming from.
So the foundation for pretty much everything we're discussing today comes from this fascinating 2005 scientific paper. And, it doesn't just talk about infrasound. The paper actually puts it into this really startling category it calls psychotronic weapons, right alongside things you might have heard of, like hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming.
So, what is infrasound, really? Let's decode it. How can a sound that we literally cannot hear become such a tangible, physical force? Well, put simply, infrasound is just sound that's pitched way too low for the human ear to pick up. Think of it like a dog whistle, but at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So you can't hear it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And it definitely doesn't mean your body can't feel it. And get this, the physical scale of these waves is just staggering. The paper points out that a single infrasound wave, at just 3.5 hertz, has a wavelength of 100 meters. I mean, just try to picture that. A single, invisible wave of sound the length of a football field passing through you. The paper puts it perfectly right here. A person hears infrasound with their whole body. And that isn't just some poetic phrase, it's literal. These incredibly long, powerful waves don't just vibrate the tiny bones in your ear, they pass through and actually resonate with your entire physical form. Okay, so if your whole body is hearing this sound, what in the world does that feel like? Well, the effects are documented, they're specific, and honestly, they're deeply unsettling. The paper actually breaks down how different frequencies can trigger these terrifyingly specific responses. For instance, in the 15 to 18 hertz range, it can bring on anxiety, dizziness, even full-blown panic attacks. But then, if you drop down to 7 hertz, well, the effect becomes a total nightmare. Subjects reported the unimaginable sensation that their body was literally being torn into small pieces. But it's not just about the frequency, it's also about the intensity or the volume, which we measure in decibels. And when you crank up the power on a sound you can't even hear, the consequences get severe. So let's look at 120 decibels. Now, for perspective, that's louder than a jet engine at takeoff, but you wouldn't hear a single thing. At this intensity, the body's systems just start to break down. It attacks your senses, causing ringing in your ears and blurred vision. But it also triggers a deep psychological response, a powerful, almost primal sense of dread, which is then followed by nausea and just general physical weakness. And if you think that sounds bad, just increasing the intensity by a small fraction pushes the human body right past its breaking point. At 130 decibels, the effects go from being deeply unpleasant to outright lethal. At 130 decibels, the vibrations are so intense that they can physically disrupt your internal organs. This can lead to things like paralysis, blindness, and can even stop your heart. This is a sound that can kill you, and you would never even hear it coming. So once you start to grasp these devastating physical effects, it becomes pretty easy to see how infrasound turns into a weapon. And not just against the body, but against the mind itself. This source paper lays out a really chilling 3-stage doctrine for what it calls information psychological war. It starts out subtly, with things like media influence, but then it escalates to using generators for direct physical attacks, with the final goal being nothing less than a full-scale effort to seize and modify human consciousness. This quote from the paper really reveals the terrifying endgame, creating a trap for consciousness, where a person can be controlled without having any memory of their actions. Now, the author gives this state a pretty dramatic and alarming label, psychotronic aids. And just to be clear, that's not a medical term. It's his own metaphor for a total collapse of the mind's defenses against any outside influence. But how is any of this even possible? I mean, how can a simple sound wave hijack the human mind? Well, the answer lies in a really fundamental principle of physics we're all familiar with: resonance. The secret here is resonance. Our brains operate on electrical frequencies, we call them brainwaves, that correspond to our mental state. So take a look at the slide. The alpha rhythm, which is our state of calm or meditation, operates between 8 and 13 hertz. Now, what was the most potent infrasonic frequency we just talked about? 7 hertz. It's almost a perfect match. So by broadcasting at this frequency, an outside force could literally compel a person's brain to sync with it, effectively hijacking their mental state. And this isn't just happening in the brain. Our organs have their own resonant frequencies, too. The paper notes that the abdominal cavity resonates at 4 to 8 hertz, which explains exactly why higher intensities cause such violent digestive disruption. It's a full-body assault. So, after going through the science, the effects, and the potential applications, what's the big takeaway from all this? What does it all mean?
Well, this brings us to the paper's pretty sobering conclusion. Infrasonic weapons are seen as a strategic priority. They really represent a new frontier of conflict, a way to achieve victory with minimal casualties, by subduing an entire population or an entire army without firing a single conventional shot, because you're targeting their bodies and their very consciousness. And all of this leaves us with one final, very unsettling question. In a world that's just filling up with more and more invisible signals, how can we ever be entirely certain that our thoughts, our feelings, and our decisions are truly our own?